I'd been counting every dollar for 6 months, every overtime shift, every skipped coffee, every time I walked past something I wanted in a store and reminded myself, no, this is for Liam. My 8-year-old's old wheelchair was too small, too worn. His therapist had warned me, the longer he's in it, the more pain he'll be in. I told her I was working on it. That I'd get him one that fit him right, a chair that would make him feel like the other kids, not like a burden. That morning, I logged into my savings account just to see the progress. I smiled when I saw the number. Enough for the new chair, with a little extra for the accessories Liam had been dreaming about, the ones with bright blue rims. But when I looked again, my stomach dropped. The balance wasn't just lower. It was empty. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video. I thought it had to be a mistake. I called the bank, my hands shaking. The woman on the other end confirmed a transfer had been made yesterday. To my mother's account. I didn't even put on my shoes. I just grabbed my keys and drove straight to their house, my heart pounding in my ears. When I walked in, the smell of cake and helium balloons hit me first. There were streamers hanging from the ceiling, music blaring from a rented speaker, and a giant gold Bob 25 balloon floating in the corner. My sister, Madison, stood in the middle of it all in a glittering dress, posing for photos. My mom spotted me and smiled like I'd come to join the fun. "You're just in time for the toast," she said, holding a champagne flute. I didn't move." "Where's my money?" I asked. She didn't even blink. "Oh, that," she said, waving her hand. "We needed a little extra for Madison's big day. You know how important this is for her." My dad appeared behind her, his arm slung around Madison's shoulder. "Don't be dramatic," he said. "It's not like it was for anything urgent." I felt my throat tighten. "It was for Liam's wheelchair," I said, my voice breaking. Madison rolled her eyes. "At least I can dance," she said with a smirk. "He can't even walk, so what's the rush?" The room erupted in laughter, not the guests, but my parents. Like it was the punchline to some twisted family joke. My mom stepped closer. "You'll get more money," she said. "You always do. This was just family priority." I stared at her, trying to understand how the woman who used to hold me when I scraped my knee could say something so cold. "You stole from your own grandson," I whispered. She tilted her head, her eyes narrowing. "Don't act like you're better than us. Without family, you're nothing." My dad clinked his glass against Madison's. "She's the one worth celebrating," he said loudly so everyone could hear. "Not someone who's raising a cripple and expecting the world to clap for it." I could barely breathe. The edges of the room blurred, but I stood there frozen, forcing myself not to cry. I knew if I cried, they'd win. I turned and walked out without another word, the sound of Madison's laughter following me to the car. At home, Liam was in the living room, playing with his toy cars. He looked up and grinned when he saw me, his small hands waving. "Did we get it?" he asked. I knelt beside him, forcing a smile so he wouldn't see the truth. "Not yet, buddy," I said softly, "but we will." That night, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, staring at the empty savings account. I replayed every word they'd said, every sneer, every time they made me feel like Liam's needs were an inconvenience. Something inside me hardened. I'd get my son his wheelchair, but I'd also make sure they regretted touching a single cent of that money. They thought they'd humiliated me. They didn't realize they'd just given me the perfect reason to destroy everything they built their pride on. I closed my laptop and started writing. Names, dates, habits, weaknesses, every piece of them I could use. Because the one thing my parents never taught me was how to forgive. But they taught me plenty about revenge. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. I didn't even need an alarm. The anger had settled into something sharper, more focused. I made Liam breakfast, packed his bag for school, and kissed his head before the bus came. As soon as he was gone, I opened my notebook from last night and stared at the first page. It wasn't just a list. It was a map straight to the heart of everything my parents valued. I knew them well enough to understand they didn't care about love, loyalty, or even family the way they claimed. What they cared about was their image. They'd spent decades building this picture of themselves as generous, respectable, and deeply admired in our community. Every fundraiser, every charity gala, every donation they bragged about was just another coat of paint on a rotting wall. I started with Madison. If there was one thing she loved more than herself, it was attention the kind that made people envy her. She'd been telling anyone who would listen that she had an upcoming audition for a high-profile dance company in New York. In her mind, she was already famous. I knew her routine by heart. Post a few practice videos online, drop hints to the right people, and let the gossip carry her into the spotlight. If I could make her trip on her own stage, she'd take my parents down with her. So, I started small. I used a burner account to follow her online, commenting little insider tips just vague enough to make her think a casting agent was watching. When she posted about needing sponsors for her audition trip, I sent her a fake message from a talent coordinator asking for a portfolio and included a list of requirements I knew she'd never meet in time. Madison didn't do preparation. She did shortcuts. And I was about to make those shortcuts lead her straight off a cliff. While she was tangled in that mess, I moved on to my parents' pride and joy, the annual community charity dinner. They'd been chosen to host this year a great honor, as they kept calling it. It was the kind of event where every handshake, every smile, every whispered compliment would later turn into favors, business deals, and social leverage. If that night went wrong, it wouldn't just embarrass them, it would follow them for years. I started collecting receipts, literal ones, invoices they never paid, bank statements showing donations that ended up in Madison's personal account, screenshots of texts where my mom bragged to her friends about using charity funds to redecorate her kitchen. None of it was illegal enough to land them in court, but it was more than enough to ruin the spotless image they guarded like treasure. I wasn't going to blast it all online. That would be too easy, too impersonal. No, I wanted the people who mattered most to them to see it up close, in the room, without them having any way to spin it. So, I compiled everything into a neat, anonymous donor concern packet and sent copies to the event's biggest sponsors. I made sure they'd all receive it the day before the dinner. Enough time to digest it. Not enough time for my parents to cover it up. Meanwhile, I made sure they thought I'd moved on. When I saw them at the store, I smiled politely. When Madison bragged about her connections over coffee, I nodded like I was impressed. When my mom hinted that I might make it up to the family by volunteering at the dinner, I agreed without hesitation. It was exactly what I wanted, a front row seat. The day before the dinner, Madison was already spiraling. Her talent coordinator had sent a follow-up email asking for a detailed dance resume, references from past instructors, and proof of competition placements. She had none of it. Her panic was delicious. She blamed the cutthroat industry in front of my parents, but I could see it in her eyes. She knew she was slipping. That night, while they were distracted consoling her, I slipped into my dad's office. The guest list for the dinner was on his desk. I took a photo of it and sent it to my printer at home. If I was going to watch them crumble, I wanted to know every single person in the room. By the time I closed my notebook that night, I could feel it, the shift. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It wasn't even just about Liam's wheelchair, though I'd already arranged for a local grant to cover the cost. This was about making them feel small, making them watch their reflection shatter in the eyes of the people they'd built their world around. And tomorrow night it was all going to happen in their own spotlight. The night of the charity dinner, their house was buzzing like a backstage dressing room. Madison was in a sequined gown, still pretending she wasn't on the verge of a breakdown. My mom barked orders at the catering staff while pretending to be gracious, and my dad adjusted his tie in the mirror like he was about to address the United Nations. I slipped on my plain black dress, blending in with the servers so no one would think twice about me moving around the room later. The venue was their temple chandeliers dripping with light, tables dressed in white linen, gold-trimmed place cards at every seat. Guests began arriving, exchanging air kisses and polite laughter. I recognized the names from my stolen guest list. Donors, business leaders, the kinds of people my parents worshipped. My dad greeted them with both hands on their shoulders, calling them old friends even if he'd met them twice. My mom floated around with Madison, introducing her as our shining star. I stayed near the edges, refilling glasses, listening. And then, like clockwork, I saw the first sponsor reading their packet. His eyes flicked from the papers to my parents, then back again, his jaw tightening. Across the room, another couple whispered, one of them pointing discreetly at Madison. My mom noticed the stares, but mistook them for admiration. Dinner was halfway through when the first real crack appeared. Mr. Harlan, the largest donor of the night, stood up without waiting for applause. He cleared his throat, his voice carrying over the clink of silverware. "Before I commit another dollar to this organization," he said slowly, "I'd like to know exactly where my previous donations went." The room fell silent. My dad's fork hovered mid-air. My mom's smile froze, brittle and thin. "I assure you, every cent," my dad began, but Mr. Harlan held up the packet. "This says otherwise." Other guests began pulling theirs out of handbags, coat pockets, inside jackets. Paper rustled like a wave. Faces turned. Whispers swelled. Someone muttered, "They used charity funds for personal expenses." My dad's face went the color of paper. Madison stood, ready to jump to their defense, but a voice from the back cut her off. "Is this the same Madison who's been taking loans under other people's credit cards?" It was one of the younger sponsors, a man with a sharp smile who'd clearly read every word of her section. The room rippled with gasps. Madison's head whipped toward me instinctively, like she knew I was the shadow behind all of this. My mom tried to regain control, standing with her hands raised. "This is all a misunderstanding," she said, forcing a laugh that no one joined. But the tide had turned. A few guests left their seats entirely, shaking their heads, murmuring about integrity and embarrassment. Someone snapped a photo. The flash lit my parents' pale, stricken faces in stark white. I stepped forward then, just enough to be seen. I didn't say a word. I simply walked to the edge of the stage where my parents stood, reached into my bag, and pulled out an envelope. I handed it to my mom. Inside was a receipt for Liam's new wheelchair, already paid for in full by someone they'd tried to impress for years, a donor who'd heard my story and quietly stepped in. Under the receipt, I'd written one line. "At least he can move forward. Can you?" My mom's lips parted, but no sound came out. My dad stared at the paper like it might burn him. Madison looked between them, cheeks blotched, mascara streaking. I turned and walked out, the hum of whispers following me to the door. Outside, the air was cool and sharp. I saw the delivery van parked at my house as I pulled up later that night, Liam's wheelchair gleaming under the porch light. He was already in it, spinning in slow, delighted circles, his laughter filling the night. I crouched down and hugged him tight. Behind me, through the dark, I could almost hear it, the choking silence of people who had finally lost the one thing they could never get back. The power to make me feel small. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video.